This tornado short summary is going to be looking at the tornado outbreak of December 10th, 2021, a year later after it happened. We had a total of just 71 tornadoes within 24 hours. While this doesn't seem like a lot, that is because it is December, and December is not the biggest month for tornadoes, although November, December do see a fair bit. April and May is mainly where it's at. We also had 8 intense, meaning EF3 and above tornadoes. And the SPC, Storm Prediction Center, issued a record 24-hour total of 43 mesoscale discussions. Mesoscale discussions can range anywhere from just simply stating that a watch issuance is likely within 2-3 hours or whatever, or or it can be as small as talking about just one individual tornado that's going on at the time. Also, the National Weather Service offices issued 149 total tornado warnings. We had 89 deaths as well as 6 non-direct deaths for a total of 95. A total of 672 people were injured, and this event caused $3.9 billion in damage. Before we get into the notables, I also want to talk about the meteorology of this outbreak, as it is very unusual. Usually in November, December, we see what are called cold core setups, which is something that I'm not going to explain in this video. Convective Chronicles, I believe, that has a video on that, so I go recommend that you check that out, at least after finishing this one, after this video, hopefully. But we had much higher than average temperatures all across the Midwest due to a extremely strong high pressure that had been sitting around, as well as obviously patterns before this. And I'm not just talking about into, the 40s and 50s. I'm talking about into the 60s and somewhere even close to being 70 degrees Fahrenheit in December. This is a bad thing for calm weather and a good thing for severe weather. Granted, if it's able to be done. We had the first watch of the day of 11, not not 11 tornado watches, but just 11 watches in total. The first one being down here at the bottom left was issued at 3 p.m. Central Daylight Time. It would last until we can see at the bottom here 11 p.m. That is the full 8 to 9 hour issuance. The cap, which is a layer of stabilized air in the atmosphere that prevents convective development, would you guess it, prevents convective development in central Missouri. However, this cap was not in place in central Arkansas. This caused the storm line to progress further down here, again in central Arkansas, and it would eventually form in central Missouri, once it got past that at least. Specifically, the cap not being a thing in central Arkansas caused some cells, which would transform into supercells, to form in front of the developing storm line, completely unhindered and able to take advantage of everything they could. These are called discrete cells, and they do not have to be supercellular. They just have to, of course, just be by themselves discrete. The first tornado that is notable here is an EF4. This is the north of Bay, Arkansas, to northeast of Sandburg, Tennessee, EF4. This is indeed the first of the two violents of the quad state cell, which was very much so a discrete cell. This EF4 would cause 9 fatalities, 14 injuries, and $13.5 million in damage. This tornado had an extremely long path at 130.63 kilometers, and at its widest was a whole mile or 1.6 kilometers wide. This tornado produced its first bit of significant or EF2 and above, in this case it was just EF2, damage 20 minutes after it touched down. While this is certainly not the most rapid intensification I've seen, at 20 minutes we are already over 10 times, probably close to 20 times actually, the average tornado ground time. Since most tornadoes are EF0 to EF1 and most don't last very long, we're talking like a path length of maybe a mile to 10 miles and a ground time of 1 to 10 minutes. This tornado would go on to destroy multiple metal truss transmission towers, which are in fact actually a damage indicator. Destroyed, sorry, and these transmission towers were destroyed at County Road 722. If I am not mistaken, at this point, we are in this little bit of Missouri. Why Missouri has a chin, don't ask me. I don't know. State's gotta have a chin. This tornado would rapidly become EF4 status just east of Braggadocio. This is surprising, especially when this tornado had been fluctuating for a relatively fair bit. It was EF1 before suddenly becoming EF4, and then it would degenerate back down to EF1. It would then ramp up back again to a peak of 170 miles per hour, or EF4, when it struck Tiptonville. Tiptonville is seen here on the map right here, named, and is in Tennessee. From this point on, the tornado would degrade, hitting a gift store at EF3 strength and hitting the community of Samberg at EF2 strength. And before we go any further, you will see this white text at the top of nearly all of the notables here. I have to thank at @NickKraz_WX for a majority of the photos in this video. I would not have the tornado photo, I would not have the track without, of course, the person who he credits took the photo and from US, I believe it's US Tornado Tracks. I believe I might have that website wrong, but Nick Kraz credits them correctly, of course. So definitely go check him out and look at the very good detailing he did on most of the notables here. Our second notable, I could not find any images of. That is because this tornado had a relatively short ground time, relatively, compared to the rest of the boys here. This is the northwest of Augusta to southeast of Harvester, Missouri EF3, with 1 death, 2 injured, and $3.4 million in damage. This tornado pathed just under 40 kilometers and reached up to 140 meters wide. This EF3 would destroy 2 homes, which you would think would place it at least at low end EF4. However, one of these homes was 110 years old and had zero anchoring, and another had very weak anchoring. So both of these discredit EF4 status immediately. And EF1 or EF2 can destroy a home with no anchoring. Anchoring is, a pretty big deal. This tornado would, however, damage many vehicles and destroy many outbuildings. Outbuildings mostly associated with farms and the like. The biggest significance from this tornado was that it forced NWS St. Louis into shelter for only the third time ever in its entire existence. This then forced NWS, I believe it was Kansas City, to run back up. And thankfully, this tornado did not obviously impact NWS St. Louis, or at least I would assume that I would have some damage photos from this then. But forcing a Office into shelter is something not commonly done by tornadoes. Our third notable is the southwest of Edwardsville, Illinois EF3. This is the tornado that caused the destruction of the Amazon facility. This tornado caused 6 deaths and 1 injury, as well as $5 million in damage. This tornado had an even shorter ground time and but larger maximum width than the previous, tracking only 6.8 kilometers and had a maximum width of just under 300 meters. This tornado was EF1 for most of its life, however, it would rapidly intensify just east of Edwardsville. With winds of 150 miles per hour, this tornado viciously lifted the roof off and caused the collapse of the west facing walls. This would ultimately cause the collapse of the entire Amazon facility. After being EF3 and deciding to strike Amazon warehouse, this tornado would, like I said before, remain EF1 for the rest of its life. A a cruel trick that Mother Nature likes to pull very often. Part 4 here, notable number 4, is the star of the show. This is indeed the Mayfield EF4, or rather specifically, it is the Woodland Mills, Tennessee to west of McDaniels, Kentucky EF4. This tornado would cause 58 deaths and at least 515 injuries. This tornado had a track that spanned an insanely long 266.5 kilometers and reached up to 2.4 miles wide. This tornado would first hit Case at EF4 strength. If I'm not mistaken, Case is in Tennessee. I believe it is in the very northern part of Tennessee. If I'm mistaken about that, I apologize. At this point afterwards, northwest of Crutchfield, it would scour the earth up to a half-foot deep. However however likely it is that this tornado is EF5 because of this. It is officially rated as a 190 mile per hour EF4. We'll get to that in just a little bit. The community of Mayfield would be under a tornado emergency at 9:26 p.m. It was at around this point, or just a few minutes later, I should say, that the candle factory was flattened. Yes, this is the candle factory that caused a lot of controversy because not allowing workers to leave, unfortunately. This tornado will then go on to absolutely wreak havoc through Mayfield's historic downtown. It was at this point that the Graves County Courthouse was badly damaged. It is worth noting that the Graves County Courthouse was a very well built structure. The clock tower was nearly gone, and if I'm not mistaken, a wall was collapsed. I think I'm making that up though. If I am, I'm sorry. Also in Mayfield, the post office, the city hall, the police and fire stations were all damaged. As you can imagine, with the PD and FD being affected, this did greatly impact their response times because they obviously had to tend to themselves as well. Moving away from Mayfield, where we got probably the most classic hook echo I've ever seen in my entire life. This tornado would directly hit the town of Dawson Springs at EF4 strength. It is it is reported by many chasers at the time that this tornado, despite only being lit up by lightning, was producing multiple satellites and was, if not multi-vortex at this time. Moving on to Bremen, Bremen's north side would be hit also at EF4 intensity. This tornado terrorized the Earth with a ground time of 2 hours and 54 minutes. This is an insanely long time for a tornado to be on the ground. Lastly, this tornado has been called by Tim Marshall, who is a professional in engineering and a meteorologist. as possibly EF5. Some things that could some things that might have indeed prevented an EF5 rating was the relatively fast forward speed of this tornado, and to put it bluntly, it not impacting a bigger town. While it is very fortunate that this tornado did indeed not impact, say, at Nashville or Carbondale or Louisville, it still very heavily impacted the communities that it did hit, and that's what matters. In the grand scheme of things, we should not be yelling at each other on the internet if a tornado is EF4 or EF5. What matters is that this tornado and all of the tornadoes that are notables here, and even the ones that aren't, impacted communities in a way that people will remember. And it's the human part of recognizing that, wow, this tornado could have hit Nashville or Carbondale. That doesn't matter. What matters is helping the people that were hit. Sorry about the little rant there. And before we move on, do you want to talk about this little picture right here above the tornado track and below the hook echo? What this is showing is debris being lofted into the updraft of the storm by the tornado up to 30,000 feet into the air. Very few tornadoes have done this because being able to detect debris aloft is a relatively new thing to be able to be detected in the first place. However, would definitely not rule out that other tornadoes have indeed done this as well. Our fifth notable is the New Bern, Tennessee to west of Elkton, Kentucky EF3. This tornado caused 34 injuries as well as $11 million in damage. This tornado crossed almost 200 kilometers, 197.8 to be specific, and was just over a mile wide at 1.8 kilometers. This tornado had rapid intensification to EF2 strength upon touchdown and would very badly damage an elementary school. This tornado struck the community of Dresden, Kentucky, not Germany. I promise this tornado did not leap the Atlantic, as a high-end EF3, specifically winds of 160 miles per hour. The fire department, newspaper office, as well as stores and other structures were either badly damaged or destroyed. It's noted that some metal frame structures were destroyed or very badly damaged as well. So, high-end EF3. In Henry County, Tennessee, I did not manage to get a specific town. A brick home was completely shifted off of its foundation, which supports the idea of either weak to no anchoring on this home, possibly. From this point on, the tornado would weaken and constantly shift between EF1 to EF2 for the rest of its life. Our sixth notable, the west of Russellville to northwest of Bowling Green, Kentucky EF3, would form just after our previous notable, with a path length 45 kilometers long and reaching under a mile wide at 1.3 kilometers wide. This tornado would at first destroy multiple dairy farms, would then collapse a metal truss transmission tower, clip just barely the south parts of Western Kentucky University campus, and hit southern Bowling Green as a high-end EF2 to high-end EF3. It would be at this point onwards, after hitting Bowling Green, it would remain around EF1 for the rest of its life. The same supercell that produced this tornado caused a twin at around the time that this tornado was hitting Bowling Green. So hitting the northern part, or hitting, sorry, even more southerly of Bowling Green. This tornado would be EF2. This event was at the time the largest outbreak in December ever in recorded history, or at least in American history, I should say. This would unfortunately be pushed down to second from just 4 days later. The derecho that would happen on November 15th and 16th would happen and caused over 100 tornadoes. This is practically super outbreak levels of tornadoes. However, thankfully, many of these would not have enough time or the energy to become greater than EF3, if I'm not mistaken. I mentioned at the beginning the record amount, 24-hour total of mesoscale discussions. You can see them all here, as well as all 11 watches. This is not only are the mesoscale discussions a record amount single day total for December, but ever for the SPC, and a record amount of tornado watches in December as well. Nearly every single notable here was produced by a discrete supercell, meaning a supercell that was ahead of the storm line and able to take advantage of anything and everything it could. The reason why the quad state cell produced two EF4s because right around here at the junction of Tennessee, Kentucky, and Missouri, it slowed just ever so slightly and also recycled. And then once it was relatively closer to Louisville, what happened was that the storm line finally caught up to this cell. The supercell did very much so not appreciate that and completely dissipated and fizzled out. Please note that this is absolutely not the norm for December. It never has been. Not only is this setup completely alien to December, this setup is what you would see in April and May, but yes, this is absolutely out of season. I am definitely planning on working on Tornado Alley and Tornado Season as a whole, despite how much I may talk about it. Tornado Alley is a myth. And however, though, rather I should say, however, it is a good geographical location relatively. And so is Dixie Alley, because you know the general regions that you're talking about then. But in a video, I will soon show why Tornado Alley is not a thing, and why Tornado Season is also technically not a thing, although kind of is too. But that aside, that is all that I have for this outbreak of December 10th through the 11th of 2021. I appreciate you all so much for watching until the very end, and I hope you, of course, learned something from this video. I will see you in the next video, and again, thank you so much for watching.